Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can always get more by subscribing to my channel. I also have a lot more content over at CareyNieuwhof.com for leaders in business and leaders in churches. And you can get transcripts of this episode there and so much more, plus some other stuff I do for leaders. So head on over there to discover more at CareyNieuwhof.com. And in the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you lead like never before. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Carey. It's good to be here, man.
Hey, it's fun.
Already been a wealth of knowledge for me, so I appreciate talking with you.
I was going to say we could have used the entire interview window just connecting personally at this point. So
Exactly. I love that, though. That makes it fun.
I'm glad we decided to turn on record and pick it up from there. So you've had a pretty fascinating leadership trajectory. You were quarterback in a D1 school. You went to the corporate field. You became a podcaster, author, speaker. You just launched your first course. That's not an automatic career path. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, my sole focus earlier in my life was in athletics, Carey. I mean, that's what I really lived to do, is play football. I played quarterback. I was fortunate to start as a freshman of my high school team at Centerville High School with a great, rich tradition, and those 4 years afforded me the opportunity to earn a scholarship. So I played in college and initially went to Miami University. I happened to go there at the exact same time as another really good quarterback named Ben Roethlisberger. And so
really?
Ben and I,
okay.
Ben and I battled it out for 2 years. I think you could probably guess how that competition went. And once the late, great Terry Hepner told me that I would either have to change positions or be okay being Ben's backup, I elected to transfer to Ohio University, where then I went and was able to use my final 2 years of eligibility and be elected captain. And that kind of was part of my leadership journey. And after to fast forward a bit, after I had earned my MBA in the corporate world, I worked at a company called LexisNexis, which I know you and your wife know well.
Yeah. Any lawyer listening would know that company.
Yeah,
so.
I was in sales, selling to lawyers, so selling to a lot of professional
negotiators. You did a good job. I don't know any lawyer who doesn't use it.
Yeah. And but after I earned my MBA, I wanted to go back to school, or at a minimum, I wanted to continue to educate myself. And so what I elected to do instead of going back to school again was to form my own leadership PhD. And that is what the Learning Leader Show, my podcast, is all about. And that was 5 years ago. And so everything that has happened since has been because of the podcast, because of the show, all of the opportunities, which then gave me the opportunity to leave corporate America. And now that's what I do full time, as we were talking about prior to recording, which is doing the podcast, keynote speaking, running leadership circles, as well as some one-on-one engagements, and now online teaching, similar to what you do. So it's pretty cool, man. It's pretty wild to see how things come together, because if you told me to map my 5-year plan 5 years ago, I don't know if any of this would be on it. And now that's why it's hard to do those exercises, because you just never know.
What year did you graduate, like finish up football at college, Ryan?
I graduated from Ohio University in 2005.
Yeah. So that's a few years in corporate, and then away you go. It's like
I played briefly football afterwards in the Arena Football League and the Canadian Football League. So I was still
CFL.
Yeah, I was still working for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Very briefly, though, they got rid of me when they realized I wasn't as good as their other guys. But had a brief shot, and then so I was doing that for 2 years, and then after that, football was done for good.
Yeah. So you were in Steeltown. And followed up, Roethlisberger went to Pittsburgh, right?
That's exactly right.
I know very little bit about football, but I know that. So
he's still there. Yeah, he's still there doing it.
Okay. Yeah, my brother-in-law is a huge Steelers fan. So shout
they
out
have
to
a great
Ralph.
fan base.
They're a great team. Steeltown, it used to be Steeltown. So I want to talk to you about your network because it's impressive. I said, a lot of people have podcasts, but it's not every day that I end up subscribing to a guest show, but you have a very impressive lineup. John Maxwell, Jim Collins, who is extremely, he just doesn't do these.
Yeah.
Talk about how you built that network from a guy who really didn't have the connections. I mean, I'm sure you could get athletes, but the path from football to Jim Collins is not direct.
I couldn't get athletes either. I mean, I think at the start of it, my first job, I was a new business cold calling inside salesperson. So I was making 70, 80 calls a day, as well as figuring out creative ways to email attorneys to get them to respond in order to just have the opportunity to hit my sales quota. And so I really focused on the art of the writing a cold email. And at the beginning of my show, probably for the first year to 18 months, since I had absolutely no platform and no name and nobody had heard of anything I've done, I had to use some of those skills I developed from my first job at LexisNexis to write compelling cold emails to convince somebody who had no clue who I was to come on the show. And as you know, Carey, as you build up, you start getting kind of more prominent people, and then other prominent people see that some of their friends have been on your show and they're more willing to do it. In the case of Jim Collins, I started emailing him and his team at the very beginning, and it took roughly probably 80 emails, 9 phone calls, multiple times him saying no, ignoring me, until eventually he had seen that I had done enough to say, okay, it's time for me to do this. And I asked him why, and he said he just kind of admired the persistence and also had listened to a few shows and liked the style, and then decided to do it. And so that then leads to the next one and the next one and the next one. And as you go and hopefully do a good job, you continue to get those prominent people that want to come and talk to you. And now it's certainly much, much easier than it was 5 years ago.
I got to break that down. Did you say 80 emails?
Oh, probably more. I mean, I use Outlook so I can actually see all of the sent. I save all of those in a podcast cold email folder so I can see all of them, because I wanted to be timely with it and not overburden him and his team. But yes, I mean, and that's just, I mean, Seth Godin was the same way, and countless others were the same way.
Yeah, drop a few other names. Yeah.
They were all, a lot of them were very similar in the fact that it was just had to regularly, and there are people that I'm currently doing that with still that have not said yes yet. So my whole thought process is no just means not yet. I will never stop trying. If I'm very curious about someone and their story, then I'll do whatever it takes, persistence wise, to continue to follow up. And I've learned from the best sales professionals in the world that I've either worked around or that have worked on my teams, that following up, persistence, not getting down when somebody says no, like those are things that you have to have in order to do this long term. I think at least successfully, especially if you don't have a name, and that's the case that I certainly at least started in, and in some cases am still in, depending on the person.
So I'd love to rewind and go back to your LexisNexis days where you cut your teeth and learn these skills, because I'm familiar with lawyers, spent a lot of, even though, that was just a year of my life in law school, I'm often in those circles. And I know the mindset, like lawyers are like, get away from me, right? Like they're not easy to get into. So how did you learn to really open up those doors? Because that is a tough job. If you're cold calling all day long, can you walk us through some strategies that failed and then some strategies that worked?
Okay, so strategies that failed would be something called bag diving, which is my dad has written about in his book. He's a published author as well, and he's led 1,000 people, sales forces as well. Bag diving would be just spewing a bunch of products, want to buy, right? Just throwing a bunch of garbage at the client, and at the prospect, they say no, and you just grab in your bag for the next one. It's a metaphoric term, but you know what I'm saying. So, hey, you don't want that. Okay, you want this? No, you want this? No, you want this. So don't do that, obviously. Sales is about listening. Sales is about understanding pain points. Sales is about figuring out current state, figuring out desired state, seeing how big that gap is, and then showing how your solution could help fill that gap. So in our case, since we know the legal field so well, I was a new business rep, meaning they did not have my product. They had usually our competitor, which you probably also had, which is called Westlaw. And so I was then learning about their Westlaw subscription, and I would have to understand what they liked or did not like about that. So I'd build that gap of current state. What do you wish you had? What is it? What could that be? And then figure out, okay, is that wish list something that I could provide for them? And in a lot of cases, it's me being a good listener, asking good follow-up questions, and then eventually sharing the solution to their problem, which is a product that I could sell them. So that's what I think. We could talk about sales for hours and hours, but I think that's what I try to do on a regular basis, if I could even get them to have the phone call with me. So I would do that in written form. I do that in speaking form. And I think the more repetitions I got, the better I got. And because I was able to do well enough at that, it gave me the opportunity to then eventually apply and get leadership roles, leading my own teams at LexisNexis, because usually if you're one of the higher performers, it gets you in the door to interview for the leadership role, and that's what happened in my case.
No, that's really impressive, and I mean, I don't find it boring at all, because really leadership is the art of persuasion, right? Yeah, most of us who listen to this podcast, we're trying to persuade somebody about something. So that's really interesting, and it reminds me a little bit of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, which everybody makes fun of the title, but at the end of the day, I think that was a mid-20th century book, early 20th century book. It's a fantastic book, and it's a similar thing, right? That sales is listening. How did you get in the door? Because that's a really good approach once you're in the door, but like when you're cold calling, what were some of the keys to getting someone who said no? Because there's people here trying to raise money, and they've been told no over and over again, and they just quit. Yeah. There have been people who are trying to hire, and they've been told no, and they've quit. So I'd love to know how you got in that door.
Yeah, so I would shift this to, this is where I really focused on email, and why learning some of those skills helped me in the podcasting space. So I think I would spend an insane amount of time of researching the people that I was emailing, and I would try to personalize those emails as much as possible. And so the basic formulas for anybody, I would say, to get someone to, all I wanted was them to respond back, to maybe agree to a phone call with me. And now in the podcasting space, to agree to think about becoming, being a guest on my show. So it's sharing, first of all, some honest flattery. So honest, something kind about them with specificity. So that shows that I've taken the time to learn about them. I like you because of X. Carey, I like you because you're the combination of a pastor, attorney, and podcaster and course creator, and you've written books, and they have impacted me in this way. Whatever it may be, it shows at least at minimum, I've read your bio, I have an understanding of what you do, and maybe take it a step further as to why that's impacted me in a positive way. Then I will shoot for some sort of uncommon commonality. If it was you and me, Carey, we're both podcasters, we both care about leadership, we both care about helping people, something along those lines. And then I will share, I will usually share some credibility about what I'm doing. So if it was my podcast in this case, I will share some of the historical things that have happened, some of the numbers, some of the past guests, some of the things that Inc. magazine or Forbes has written about me or my show. And then I will have a direct ask in bold. I'd love for you to be a guest on my show, or I'd love to have a conversation about you being a guest on my show. And they write back. When it comes to at Lexis, I was sharing something about other people I've helped, how them working with me has made their life better. And I would share some of that. So that's some of that credibility building. And then some of the details about how my offering is better than perhaps what they're currently using, because I'd have an understanding of that based on my research. And then I would ask for a call or ask for a follow-up. And so also the good thing to know is that when you are cold calling or cold emailing, success is like one in a lot. So you're going to fail almost every single time, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be willing to keep at it day after day. And a lot of people are saying, wait, cold emailing, cold calling? No, thanks. I'd rather do something else.
Yeah. It's something
and
like...
I get it. But I would say, though, I am so grateful that was my first real job out of when I got done playing football, because it taught me, my first real job was really hard, and it also taught me so many skills that I've continued to use for the rest of my career, and I will continue to use. So I always tell people, and I know I'm biased, but I would say, what should I do when I get done with college? I say, get a job in sales. It's really hard, and you'll learn skills that will transfer to other parts of your career that will be very useful. So if you're not really sure, and you're not going to go be a doctor or something like that, get a job in sales and see if you can hang there, because it'll help you regardless of what you choose to do next.
How did you keep yourself encouraged? how did you adopt that mindset? Because a lot of people would say the difference between an effective salesperson and an ineffective one is the ineffective one stops on the third call, the effective one goes to the 10th or perhaps the 80th. How did you keep yourself in the game and not just go home defeated every day after a whole sea of no's?
I mean, I had some occasional success, and that created momentum, and that created confidence, and I just kept at it. And also my mindset. So I was not a talented enough football player to probably get a scholarship, and so I was fortunate to have incredible coaching in high school, and they taught me the value of a work ethic, of persistence, of resilience, of never, ever quitting. And I used that, what I learned from these incredible coaches, that I applied to the football field. I applied the exact same mentality in the selling world. Additionally, at that time, there were stack rankings every day on our activity and on our performance. Yes, it sounds horrible, but for someone who was coming straight from the football field, who was in a very competitive environment where I lost a big competition, the first one that I really wanted to win, which is Ben and I, that my mindset was geared for that. I was ready to go. I loved it, in fact, and I was very motivated to finish in that number one spot. Now, I don't know if that's healthy to be in a situation like that long term, but at least for the time being, it really was helpful for me. Former athlete, still hyper competitive, still loved the scoreboard, all of that. That was good for me to be in a setting like that. And it certainly drove part of my work ethic to keep going, to get through the no's, to think of it as not yet, and just go. And then once some of the success hit, then I really felt it and thought, okay, it was a low salary, high variable compensation job, so you could make a ton of money if you crushed it. And so that started happening to me at a young age too, which is like, this is pretty cool. I don't mind this part either. This is kind of the scoreboard here at a young age when I'm still immature. I thought that was useful for me to do at that time in my life.
If I'm nerding out, let me know. But I just find this fascinating, and I've never had this conversation.
Man. I love it. I don't always get to talk about this, so I appreciate it.
No, this is great, Ryan. Okay, so these are clearly not cut and paste emails. You're not just like, you're doing research. It probably takes you 30 to 90 minutes to research and write one of these emails. So it's not easy to do. And you get no response. How do you change that from the first email to number 80? Like, is it just you resend that first one saying, hey, maybe you didn't see this, or you rewrite it, or they get shorter or longer? I'm really, really curious. This is fascinating.
So I will update them based on what's going on with them and what's going on with me. So I will, if they have new things happening, new books, new things they're trying to promote, I will update them, as well as I'll update the credibility part. Maybe Forbes has written a new article about my show. I will share that. Maybe I will share some of the growth in the show. I will give updates on every single time. So people may think it's crazy, but I mean, it's hard to get these guests to come on in a lot of cases when you're not fully established. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason, though. I like that. I like that it's hard, and because that gives me an opportunity to make it happen when others are like, screw it, I don't want to do that anymore. So I think the hard is what makes it good. But yeah, I mean, it's my whole thing of people when they send me emails, and I ask for this on my show, just be specific about it. Don't cut and paste emails. Be specific. And if you don't have time to do that, then don't send the email. Either my whole mentality with everything, when I wrote a book, when I had a podcast, when I give a speech, if you're going to do it, then do it. Go 100% or zero. I'm not real big on saying, let's just try it out. We'll just see what, I like experimentation, but I think if I'm going to experiment, I'm going to experiment 100%. I'm not just going to, I'm not sure. It's either all go or not go at all. And I think whether it's a cold email, whether it's writing a book, giving a speech, doing a podcast, that's really my mentality towards the actions that I choose to take.
Because I know Collins is notoriously difficult to get. He barely ever grants interviews. And I listened to your interview with him, among others. And, it's clear he did a lot of research on you. He started by asking you questions. So you get an audience, so to speak. And I'm thinking about all the leaders listening to this. It's like, I finally landed Jim Collins, whoever that Jim Collins is in your world. By the way, if you haven't clued in, author of Good to Great, et cetera, one of the most prolific and well-respected business authors of this generation, who really just doesn't have to do anything. I mean, he granted an interview last year to Tim Ferriss, which was amazing. It sounds like he went along with yours, and he said when his next book comes out, he's going to connect with you, if I remember that correctly. He's like, he wanted to follow you with interest. Same thing with Maxwell. Maxwell made a really fascinating connection with you and your brother. He knew your brother, right? So all this is happening, but how do you decide in that moment what you were going to talk to Jim Collins about?
Well, I don't decide in the moment most of the time. I had a pretty sizable outline that I then condensed prior to that conversation to say, what are the key points or potential stories that I want to talk about? What are the questions? I have a few anchor questions, but the bulk of my show is based upon, just like you, Carey, it's based upon me being a good listener and asking good questions, even better follow-up questions. That's really my process. So to do that, you have to be an active listener, again, like you are, in order to go deeper into maybe different places to that person has never gone before. In Jim's case, he doesn't do many, so there wasn't a lot of examples to listen to. But I just followed the things I was most curious about, and to get him to not only talk about his time with Peter Drucker, which was a goal of mine and on my outline, but to hear him use Peter Drucker's accent and say the thwap, like he hit me with a bamboo stick, like I'll never forget it. And so that was like a mission accomplished part of that one, because Peter Drucker's a legend. Anyone in this space, we've, effective executive or whatever you've read, he is the guy, the godfather of this stuff. And to hear Jim Collins, who is another one of the godfathers, talk about their interactions, I know is quite rare. And so I have goals and things I want to get to, and I want actual real stories, right? Not just the high level zoomed out, but the moment they're sitting in the car and he thwapped them in the head with the bamboo stick to say, it's about being effective and being useful for other people. That's the stuff I really try to get to. So I'm always conjuring up ways. How can I get them in that moment? How can I get them sharing that, where you could tell he started to enjoy himself? And that's a goal of mine, because if they're enjoying themselves, they're being introspective and reflective, the good stuff will come out, and then my listeners will benefit. I'll enjoy it. Jim will enjoy it. And then, we build a real relationship. And I think one of the coolest parts, as you could probably attest to, Carey, is that when you can build an actual genuine relationship with your guest, where you become friends. And so that's happened a lot, where I then have had multiple dinners and traveled to the cities of these people, as well as do sometimes the same thing with your listeners. So podcasts like building a really cool community where you can reach out to your heroes, sometimes befriend them, have them live up to these lofty expectations. It's quite cool, that aspect of it that I really love. And it also seems to help gather the type of people that I want to be around when it comes to not only the guests, but the listeners of the show too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can attest to that. Sometimes you get to interview your heroes, and I worked for a couple of years to set up an interview with a guy named Gordon McDonald, who you may or may not know, a legend in many circles, especially if you're over 40. If you're under 40, most church leaders would never know him. But I found out he did email friendships, and we've developed an email friendship. I mean, he's 80. And my wife and I are traveling there this summer, not for another interview, but just to hang out for a day with him and his wife. And that is just gold. That is so such cool. A privilege. I'd love to know how you care for your listeners. And I'm really thrilled. So many leaders, it's a temptation, Ryan, to become totally self-absorbed or to get lost in that world. I try to take care of my leaders, the listeners. I'd love to know how you do that.
I encourage them to reach out to me. Email. I don't hide the email. People can email me directly, and they can text to opt into what I do as well too. And for the most part, I think leaders need to be proactive, but leaders also need to be responsive. And so when somebody needs you, or they have a real specific question, Sometimes I'll notice if they wrote me an email with a question and their phone number happens to be in there, I'll just call them without even responding to the email. Just out of the blue, I'll call them. Or if they ask for a call, I'll do it. I do block time on every single week, time for people who have taken the time to send me a specific thoughtful email, and I either write them back or I will call them. And I think that has developed some really cool relationships with people that have gone on to still be friends, colleagues to this day. So you just never know. You never know. And sometimes if you talk like from a business perspective, sometimes it works out in that regard too. I never go into it though thinking this is for business reasons. It's always to nurture and to be grateful for the people who invest their time, because that's the most valuable resource they have. It's always to say thank you and to try to be helpful for the people who because I'm a believer, Carey, and I know you are too, of your audience grows literally one person at a time, one at a time, and never forget that. And I think that the founders of Airbnb said this first, but I believe in it, that I think in order to scale, you have to do things that don't scale. And so calling listeners, emailing them back, being responsive, being not an assistant or anybody, but me actually doing it, that then creates an actual relationship. And that person then is probably going to continue to listen. They're probably going to tell their friends, and word of mouth marketing is the absolute best form. A genuine referral, no money exchanges hands, nothing like that. Just a genuine referral. That's how the show steadily grows. And business-wise, for me, when the show grows, everything else does too. And so that's really my focus, is on always taking care of, nurturing, being there for the people who invest their time with me.
I think that's a really good point, because for a lot of us, and there are my audience, from what I know about them, some people are leading very small things where that's not that difficult, and that's awesome. But for some, they're leading very large things. And it's like, I don't know everyone's name, and some are leading person, in a church or a large organization. They have hundreds, thousands who are part, and you can build that wall as a leader where nobody gets to see you, nobody gets to spend time with you. And honestly, it's a daily tension for us with just the content being accessed about 1.5 million times a month. It's like, wow, we just get overwhelmed sometimes.
How do you do it? Yeah,
What's
how
that?
do you do it? How do you do it? How do you stay close? Yeah.
I always said I would always answer my email personally. And then I remember there was a day a couple of years ago, we got 1,000 emails in an afternoon. And I'm like, okay, I die now. This is like, even my team can't keep up. So I have 2 amazing people who answer the public inbox, and they don't pretend to be me. They're them. Sarah and Lauren currently are doing it, and they do a great job. And then occasionally, I've started this more because I realize it's a really good practice. I'll just randomly call people, and it's not fair. It's not fair because I called you, but I didn't call the other guy, or called the other guy, but I didn't call you. But I think it's so easy to lose touch. I've got a phone call in my Asana list right now that I'm going to make probably tomorrow to some guy who's just like, if there was ever, and unfortunately there's 15 people that probably got to know, but everybody gets acknowledged. And so I've scaled a system with staff, and that costs money. I mean, I pay 2 people to basically respond on my behalf. And, we are able to do that financially in my organization, but it's complicated. And I know a lot of leaders I know, and I struggle with this as a pastor too. It's extremely difficult to get to that point. And you don't want to be elitist where, of course I'm going to take Jim Collins' call, but I'm not going to take Jim from, Kentucky. I'm not going to take his call. So I just love to know any other filters or rules that you have in that area. That's how I've done it. Not perfectly.
I love it. I mean, I'm with you because they're random. So there are people who are probably listening like, wait, what do you mean? I've even do 5 times and I've never got a response. Or I try my best when possible. There sometimes are better than others, where I'm more there. But yeah, like getting 1,000 in an afternoon is certainly to the point where you're kind of, you put your hands up saying how can we best manage?
I'm going to buy a new computer. I'll just start over again with fresh accounts, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
Yeah. Okay, that's really good. You got a new book, which is a great book for those of you watching. It's called Welcome to Management. And I've read a lot of leadership books. You've got a unique angle on this, and you raise a really good point. It's been encapsulated in other places. as the Peter principle. And I think you referenced that, where you get promoted to your level of incompetence. In other words, the great sales guy who's crushing it at LexisNexis becomes the sales manager. And what made you a great salesperson is not necessarily making you, a great manager. So can you walk us through why not all top performers make excellent leaders? Just make that clear for us.
The skill set is just completely different. You go from of having to focus on the performance of you as an individual to the performance of, in my case, a team of 15 very different personalities, different people with different motivations and different purposes and different processes. And that is dramatically different than just focusing on yourself. In fact, you certainly have to lead yourself first, but in this case, you have to truly get to understand the dynamics of each of those people that you are leading, and then help them lift their levels of performance, answer their questions, understand the way that they are. There's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of EQ involved. You have to be a good listener. There's so many different skills that don't fully apply just to you being worried about yourself as a top performer, as opposed to that of perhaps 15 others. So it is entirely different. When I got the reason I wrote about this particular time in your career is because when I made that leap, I unfortunately was not very good at the job for a while. And so I had to learn a lot through the course from mentors, through making mistakes, and then eventually launching my podcast and learning from great leaders throughout the world of how to do that better. And the goal of this is to help prepare the top individual performer who's going to make that leap at some point in their career, as well as the people who are in those leadership positions that perhaps have not had great training. And Carey, leading into writing the book, I was doing an immense amount of research with people who had made this leap in a variety of companies throughout North America. And I would ask, what was the training like when you made that first jump? And the responses would be like laughing emojis and eye rolls and things like that, saying there may have been nothing. Yeah, right. Like, figure it out. And I was lucky to have an incredible boss, but I wasn't the only person that reported him. He had a lot of different things going on. So I still had to stumble through and make mistakes. So my goal is, you get promoted, big congratulations, smack on the back, and you hand him this book and say, this could be a manual for you to help you be better at not making the same mistakes that I did when you're a new manager.
It's been a slow journey for me too. And I know my early instincts were just to say, what do you mean? Just like work harder, you'll figure it out. Right. And so, and people don't respond to that. You break things down into like leading yourself, building the team, and leading your team. Can you run us through some of the key things a leader needs to do to lead him or herself well, Ryan?
Well, I find that self-awareness may be an underrated skill to develop. And so one of the ways to lead yourself is to get a true understanding of self. And so some of the things that I would do in order to have a better understanding of me, and regularly holding a mirror up to my actions and my behaviors, is to surround myself with the proper who. And that's a big thing I learned, as you heard Jim Collins and I talk about. Yeah, the why is important and the what's important, but your who will be the single greatest determining factor in your long-term success. So who are the people that you have on that mentor board of advisors, your personal MBA, your mentor board of advisors? Who are those people that can be very honest with you, that you admire, respect? Perhaps they have accomplished what you'd like to do. Who are those people for you that you can regularly go to with questions, with ideas, that you can receive coaching from them to say, this is how I handled a meeting? Or maybe could you sit in on my meeting and give me feedback afterwards? Or could you even sit in on a one-on-one to see how I do it, to look at my process, to prepare, to do that? And then have your one-on-one meetings with them where you can say, all right, let's get specific about specific things that I am actually doing. Right. How am I doing? Please, I need brutal honesty from you. How am I doing? Getting that feedback is the gold. I mean, that is such a gift to get that, because that's how you develop self-awareness, introspection. You can reflect on that and then work to improve. So that's a big part of how you can lead yourself.
A lot of leaders resist that. They're like, tell me a little bit, but I don't really want to know the whole story. And honestly, those of us who are married, we resist it in our marriage. It's never our fault. It's always someone else's fault. It's kind of a variation of a question I asked you earlier. But how did you receive that kind of criticism without getting defeated? Because I know a lot of leaders who are very sensitive to that and they just kind of shut down and then they're like, yeah, I'm not going to hear that anymore.
Yeah, so I think this is where my athletic background is very helpful. So I've had coaches in my life since I started playing sports, and I've been very lucky to have good coaches. And so I've seen the impact they could have on me. And I was taught, my parents raised us to be coachable kids, to be respectful of those coaches. And so I've always seen coaches, and again, I may be privileged and lucky because I've had great coaches. I've always seen them as people who were there to help me. And so when someone had the combination of the guts to share tough news with me, as well as share something that could help me, I've been grateful. So I know that's not always the case with everybody. I know part of it is because of my upbringing and because of what's been kind of drilled in our minds that these people are here to help you. Listen to them, heed their advice, try to do what they're asking you to do. That I've taken that from the field and put it into the business world. And so certainly I will say, though, I am selective on who I choose to get that coaching from. I do need to have a high level of respect, trust, and confidence in what they've been able to do. That's why I look for actual practitioners, people who have actually done what I want to do. That's important to me, that I could then I could ask based on their experience and the things that they've learned from their mentors in their life.
A lot of leaders, in my experience, do not have that. I like how you said it. MBA. What's that stand for?
A mentor board of advisors.
Yeah. I put one together. I had elders for years and they were fantastic. And when I stopped being the lead pastor 5 years ago, I put a personal board together. I actually, the week we're recording this, met with them on Monday in Atlanta. And just really great people who love me, who understand what I do, who I think, even though one or two are younger than me, are ahead of me in some areas of life, and who give me honest feedback. A lot of leaders are alone. I get those emails. I'm sure you do. It's like, hey, what should I do? Should I leave my job? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know you from Adam. I don't know how to answer that. There are some leaders listening right now, Ryan, who are like, I need to know how to put that board together. Any suggestions for them?
Yeah, well, I think it's wise of you that it's not just the old sage, getting the old person with sage, wise advice, that it can be people from all different ages and experiences. I'm looking for, so for me, what it is who are people that have accomplished some things that I want to do. So in the space of book writing, I have a few of the mentors that have written incredible books that I've been lucky that they play a role for writing books. When it comes to speaking, there's a few different people. When it comes to podcasting, there may be a few different ones there. When it comes to leading a team, there are a few different ones there. So mine get pretty specific based upon what they are. Dare I say, I mean, I view them as world class, even if they're not famous or anything, but I think they are excellent at that specific task. And some of them carry over. Some great writers are also great speakers, and so and podcasters maybe too. But I've been fortunate to then reach out to those who are really great at what they do, and then try to build an actual relationship with them. I'm not always able to give as much as they are, but there are times where there are ways that you can give to and not just receive. And I try to get creative and figure out ways to do that. One thing I did early in my career as an example of that, when I felt like I had almost nothing to give, was when I met with the more experienced, wise person who had a senior level title that maybe I was going for that earlier in my career when I cared about that a lot. I would follow up. I would ask to meet with them, and if they were gracious enough to do that, I would take very detailed, diligent notes, and I would follow up those meetings with a very set, hey, here is what I've learned. I'm very grateful that you shared it for me. Here is what I'm going to put into action based upon what you said. Thank you again. And by the way, I would imagine, given what you've accomplished and everything that you do, that you probably mentor other people too. Go ahead and click forward on this email and try to help other people as well at the same time. So I'm not the only one going to benefit from this 1 hour meeting. Maybe I can be a multiplier like Liz Wiseman has said. This is the way that I can multiply that hour for you, because instead of just spending it on me, maybe you could spend it on 8 people. So that 1 hour became 8 hours. And that could also save them time, and it documents their thoughts. And sometimes that's useful for a leader as well, because we all like to have a kind of detailed outline of what we're thinking, and not everybody takes the time to write it down. So if you do it for them and you're helping other people, you're a multiplier, and you've done a task for them that they could use that for future meetings. And I found that as a way to be helpful, and mentors seem to like that. So I still do that to this day, regardless of everything. And it seems to be helpful, and people like it.
No, I want to affirm that. I have been in meetings before where you give away your time and people are like, I don't really have any questions. I just wanted to get together. And then you're like, okay, I guess we're hanging out. I hope leaders are taking notes. And of course, we've got transcripts and the show notes and everything too. But this is really, really good. All right. Communication. Really, really important. It's pretty clear that you work on communication. What do you mean by that? Like public and private communication? Why is communication so critical? And Ryan, what skills do you think young leaders need to develop?
Well, I've learned this, Carey, from my dad at a young age. He always said, your job as a leader is to always be vividly clear. And he always focused on that word vividly clear in your communication with the people you are leading. They need to know exactly what the mission is, why that mission is important, and then even more important, what their specific role is in accomplishing the mission. And so as your job as a communicator, really develop your written skills. You're going to write emails. You're going to write papers. Really develop getting good at being clear and understanding the point behind that. And then when it comes to speaking, he told me again, I've seen the skill of being able to get up in front of a group of people and concisely share the essence of the message of what you're trying to teach. That is vital if you care to get promoted, if you care to be a leader, because if you can do that, you will separate yourself from the rest of the group. And leaders, I mean, think about, what do leaders do? We run meetings, we write emails, we have one-on-one talks, we give town hall addresses. I mean, the bulk of the time, a leader should be a thoughtful person, but then they have to be great communicators. We can all envision that incredible boss that we've had in our mind, or a leader we've worked for, or a coach we've played for. And think about the ones who were excellent at what they do, and think about the ones who they were not. I guarantee you, these ones in the column that were excellent, they were great communicators, and probably multiple facets. So that's why it's such an important skill to develop. And it's one of the reasons why I started my podcast as well, because I knew getting the reps, having these types of conversations that you and I are having would just force me to become a better listener and a better speaker. And that's certainly, I think, over time has helped.
So final question for you. You've met just hundreds, if not thousands, of leaders, some whose names we wouldn't know, and obviously some of the top in the world, like you say, world-class leaders. What are some of the common characteristics in success? So as you meet these high-capacity leaders, what are some common traits that you're like, man, these are just always present? They seem to be just the core characteristics.
I would say they are, first, incredibly thoughtful people. They take time to reflect and analyze why something was successful or why something failed. They are they think about the perspective of the other person that they're leading on a regular basis, and that creates compassion and empathy. That all starts from being a thoughtful person. And then from that thought, they act with intention. They're very intentional with their behavior. They don't wander around aimlessly just hoping for the best. They've thought it through. They understand all of the perspectives. They've reflected on it, and then they make a decision and they go. And this is just the regular process of how they behave on a daily basis. And I found those are the types of people we want to follow. Those are the types of people where we think, I should be more like that. Isn't that the type of leader we all want to be? And so I think that combination of thoughtfulness and intentionality are two critical skills to develop for anyone who wants to be an effective leader.
That's great. Well, man, we've scratched the surface. The book is called Welcome to Management. And it's not fluff. There's a lot of books that are fluff. This is actually a really, really great primer with much more than we could cover today. And you put an index in it, which is not typical every day. So it makes it a really good reference book.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Carey. Coming from you, this means a lot, man. I had high expectations, coming in, obviously, and you somehow crushed it. So I really appreciate you, being such a thoughtful guy yourself. It's cool to talk to you.
Well, it's 100% mutual. People are going to want to follow you online. Yeah. What is the easiest way to discover all things in sort of your universe?
My website's learningleader.com. And so that has everything. And social, Ryan Hawk 12, Ryan Hawk 12. And then if you happen to be listening on your phone and you're not driving, you can text the word learners with an S, learners to 44222. And that's how you can get a hold of me.
And if you are driving, we'll have that in the show notes and the transcripts for free. And last thing is, the foreword to your book is by General Stanley McChrystal. If you know who that is, you will be impressed.
Legendary 4-star general and a kind, sweet man. And I'm so grateful to have built a relationship with him. And he was so generous in his words and taking a significant time to write that forward. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Well, Ryan, if you'd be open, I'd love to have you back sometime. Thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, man. Thanks so much, Carey.
Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can always get more by subscribing to my channel. I also have a lot more content over at CareyNieuwhof.com for leaders in business and leaders in churches. And you can get transcripts of this episode there and so much more, plus some other stuff I do for leaders. So head on over there to discover more at CareyNieuwhof.com. And in the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you lead like never before.